Have you noticed that nothing has really collapsed, and yet everything feels slightly wrong? The same rooms, the same faces, the same routines, the same life you were living before, but something in you no longer lands there the way it used to. It's like reality still recognizes your name, but no longer fits your skin. And the strangest part is that you can't fully explain it to anyone, because from the outside, nothing looks different. But inside, something is shifting its position. The timing of things feels strange. Certain people feel farther away. Old desires feel dimmer. Your mind keeps trying to call this confusion, exhaustion, overthinking. But deeper down, you know it's something else. Something is being adjusted beneath the surface of your life, and until you understand what is really happening, everything will keep feeling off for a reason you can almost sense, but not yet name. There comes a moment when the world doesn't change, but your relationship with it does. You wake up, look around, and everything is technically in place. The room is the same. The people are the same. The routine is waiting for you like it always has. And yet, something inside you stands at a distance, watching your own life as if it belongs to someone you used to be. At first, you may try to explain it in ordinary ways. Maybe you're tired. Maybe you're stressed. Maybe you just need a break, a better night of sleep, a different schedule, a cleaner room, a clearer mind. But then it follows you into places where you used to feel normal. A familiar street feels unfamiliar. A conversation feels slightly delayed. A habit that once comforted you now feels strangely empty. This is one of the first signs that your inner rhythm is no longer moving at the same speed as your outer reality. Life is still playing the old song, but something in you is hearing another note underneath it. You laugh when you're supposed to laugh, answer messages when you're supposed to answer, show up where you're supposed to show up, but a quiet part of you is no longer fully there. Not because you're broken, because some deeper layer of you has stopped agreeing with the version of life you were trained to accept, and this is why the feeling can be so unsettling. Nothing looks dramatic enough to justify the intensity of what you feel. There may be no crisis, no obvious loss, no visible reason to say, something is wrong. But the atmosphere has changed. The emotional texture of your life has shifted. It's like walking through a house where all the furniture is in the same place, but the lights have been replaced by colder bulbs. You may also notice that time starts behaving strangely around this stage. Some days feel too fast, as if they vanish before you can touch them. Other moments feel strangely slow, almost suspended, as if reality is waiting for you to notice something. You may feel disconnected from your own memories, as though they happen to a version of you that still shares your name, but no longer shares your frequency. That distance can feel lonely, because nobody else can see it. But hidden inside that distance is a message. Your consciousness is beginning to separate from an old pattern. The mind often calls this confusion because it doesn't know what else to call it. But sometimes confusion is not the absence of direction. Sometimes it is the first sign that the old map no longer matches the territory. You are not losing touch with life. You are losing touch with a version of life that could only hold a smaller version of you. And before the new pattern can appear clearly, the old one must first begin to feel strangely unfamiliar. Before something aligns, it often has to pass through disorder. This is the part almost nobody understands, because we are taught to treat discomfort as evidence that something has gone wrong. But sometimes the discomfort is not the problem. Sometimes it is the signal that an old structure is loosening its grip. You are standing between two realities, one that no longer feeds you, and one that has not yet become solid enough to trust. This is why old things may suddenly lose their emotional charge. A goal you once chased begins to feel hollow. A relationship you once depended on starts to feel distant. A routine that once gave you identity now feels like a costume you forgot how to wear. The strange part is that these things may not be bad. They may simply no longer carry the same energy because the part of you that needed them is changing. And this creates a very specific kind of tension. You can't fully go back, but you can't fully move forward either. You may try to revive old excitement, old ambition, old distractions, old versions of yourself, but something refuses to respond. It's like turning the key in a door that used to open easily, only to realize the lock has quietly been changed. A life that once answered you now stays silent, not because you're being rejected, but because you're being redirected. Psychologically, this is the space where the nervous system becomes confused by the loss of familiar signals. Even unhealthy patterns can feel safe if they are predictable. Even draining relationships can feel comfortable if they confirm an old identity. So when those patterns begin to dissolve, the body may interpret freedom as danger. You may feel anxious not because something terrible is coming, but because something familiar is leaving. And the body often grieves familiarity before the soul can recognize liberation. This is the paradox of recalibration. The closer you are to a deeper alignment, the more misaligned everything may feel for a while. Not because the new reality is wrong, but because the old one is losing its authority. You are no longer fully tuned to the life behind you, but not yet fully tuned to the life ahead of you. So everything feels distorted. People feel strange. Timing feels strange. Even your own desires feel like they are speaking from another room. The hidden truth is that disorder can be a form of intelligence. It can be life rearranging what you were too loyal to question. It can be the silence before a new signal becomes audible. So when everything feels off, the real question may not be, how do I make it normal again? The deeper question may be, what part of me is finally refusing to return? And once that question appears, something even more unsettling begins to happen. The certainties you built your life around start to collapse from the inside. There is a point in the calibration process where the things you were once so sure about begin to lose their weight. Not all at once, not dramatically, but quietly, almost privately, as if some inner authority has stopped signing the old agreements. You may still say the same things. You may still follow the same plans. But inside, a strange silence appears where certainty used to live. This can feel frightening because certainty often gives us the illusion of control. It tells us who we are, what we want, where we're going, who matters, what success should look like, and what kind of life we're supposed to protect. But many of those certainties were never truly chosen. They were inherited, absorbed, performed, repeated. They were borrowed from family, culture, fear, pain, approval, survival. And now, something in you is beginning to notice the difference between truth and conditioning. That is why certain ambitions may suddenly feel empty. Not because you became lazy, not because you lost your potential, but because the version of you that needed that achievement to feel real is dissolving. You may look at a dream you carried for years and feel almost guilty for not wanting it the same way anymore. It's a strange grief, realizing that some of your goals were built by someone you were trying to prove wrong. Relationships can reveal this collapse even more intensely. Someone's opinion that used to control your mood no longer reaches the same place inside you. A dynamic that once pulled you in now feels repetitive, almost theatrical. You hear the same words, the same patterns, the same emotional hooks, but something in you doesn't obey them like before. And then comes the uncomfortable realization. Maybe you were not attached to the person as much as you were attached to the role you played around them. Maybe the certainty was never love, loyalty, or destiny, but familiarity wearing a sacred mask. This is where confusion becomes strangely honest. Because when borrowed truths begin to fall away, there is often nothing immediately ready to replace them. You may feel blank. You may feel exposed. You may wonder why nothing inspires you the way it used to. But that emptiness is not proof that you have no direction. It may be the first time your inner life has stopped repeating answers that were never really yours. The hidden truth is that reality cannot recalibrate around a false center. So before your life can begin to reflect who you are becoming, it must reveal what was never truly yours to begin with. This is why the collapse of certainty feels so personal. It doesn't just question your choices. It questions the identity that made those choices feel necessary. And once that false center begins to crack, life often responds with disruptions that seem random, until you notice they are correcting something you could no longer correct by yourself. Some disruptions arrive looking like punishment. The door closes. The message doesn't come. The opportunity vanishes. The plan falls apart at the exact moment you thought it was finally becoming stable. And because the mind hates uncertainty, it immediately tries to turn the event into a verdict against you. But what if not every delay is denial? What if not every ending is loss? What if some obstacles are not standing against your path, but standing between you and a version of the path that would have cost you something invisible? There are moments when life interrupts your momentum because your momentum was carrying you towards something your deeper self had already outgrown. You were moving fast, but not necessarily in the right direction. And disruption becomes the strange mercy that slows you down before you confuse movement with alignment. Think about the times something didn't work, and only later you understood why. The relationship that ended before it consumed more of you. The job or project that rejected you before you could abandon yourself for it. The delay that felt cruel, but quietly placed you somewhere better. At the time, it felt like reality was blocking you. But later, from a distance, you saw that something was being rearranged with a precision your fear could not recognize. This is the hidden intelligence behind disruption. It rarely explains itself while it is happening. It does not arrive with a clear message or a comforting voice. It often appears as tension, inconvenience, repetition, exhaustion, or the strange feeling that the harder you push, the more life pushes back. And that resistance can make you angry, because part of you still believes that force is proof of commitment. But sometimes force is only proof that you haven't accepted the signal yet. Psychologically, disruption exposes the places where control has become identity. When something refuses to obey your plan, you discover what you were secretly depending on to feel safe. You discover which outcome had become your emotional anchor. You discover how much of your peace was conditional. And this is uncomfortable because it reveals that you were not only attached to what you wanted, you were attached to who you thought you would become if you got it. The perspective shift is quiet, but it changes everything. A blockage may not be life saying no to your future. It may be life refusing to let your past choose your future for you. This is why some things become heavy when you try to force them, and lighter the moment you stop chasing them. Something beneath the surface is testing whether you trust the old signal or the emerging one. And this is where the next layer becomes unavoidable, because the more you resist the recalibration, the more distorted reality begins to feel. The moment everything starts to feel off, the first instinct is usually to pull life back into its old shape. You try to recover the feeling you had before. You revisit the same places, repeat the same routines, reach for the same people, chase the same kind of certainty. But instead of feeling comforted, you feel even more displaced. It's like trying to tune an old radio station that is no longer broadcasting clearly. The more you turn the dial backward, the louder the static becomes. This is why the phrase, "don't resist it," is not soft advice. It is a warning about how distortion works. Resistance traps your attention inside the reality that is already dissolving. You keep measuring the present against a version of life that no longer exists in the same form. So everything feels wrong, not only because things are changing, but because part of you is demanding that they stop changing. And that demand creates a split inside you. You may notice this in the smallest moments. You force yourself to enjoy conversations that feel empty. You try to feel excited about plans that used to energize you. You pretend certain places still feel like home. You answer messages out of obligation, not presence. And afterward, instead of feeling connected, you feel strangely drained, as if you betrayed something quiet inside yourself just to keep the old image alive. The psychological insight here is that the mind often confuses familiarity with safety. Even if the old pattern was heavy, predictable heaviness can feel easier than unknown freedom. So when your inner world begins to change, the mind may panic and call the old life back, not because it was right, but because it was recognizable. This is how people stay loyal to versions of themselves that are already gone. They don't resist transformation because they hate growth. They resist it because the old cage still feels like shelter. But surrender is not giving up. Surrender is the moment you stop arguing with the evidence of your own transformation. It is not weakness. It is not passivity. It is the quiet intelligence of allowing the new pattern to stabilize before you understand it completely. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop forcing your life to feel normal when your soul is clearly no longer normalizing the same things. And this is where something subtle begins to happen. The moment you stop gripping the old signal, the distortion softens. Not because everything is solved, but because you are no longer fighting the movement underneath the surface. A different kind of listening begins. You start noticing what feels heavy, what feels false, what feels strangely peaceful, what no longer asks for your performance. And before the mind can explain any of it, the body begins to reveal what it has been sensing all along. Your body often knows before your mind is ready to admit it. It feels the shift before you have language for it. It notices when a room feels heavier than it should. It tightens before a conversation turns strange. It grows tired around things you used to tolerate easily. And sometimes, long before you make a decision, your nervous system has already begun withdrawing its energy from the old pattern. This is why recalibration can feel so physical. You may feel restless for no clear reason. You may need more silence than usual. Your dreams may become vivid, symbolic, or emotionally intense. Your sleep may change. Your appetite for noise, drama, attention, or constant stimulation may suddenly decrease. And because the mind cannot find one simple cause, it may label everything as anxiety, exhaustion, or overthinking. Sometimes that may be part of it, of course. The body is human, not mystical machinery. It needs care, rest, grounding, and patience. But there is another layer that many people ignore. The nervous system is always reading reality faster than thought can interpret it. It tracks tone, timing, tension, absence, contradiction, emotional temperature. It senses when something no longer matches the truth you are becoming. You've probably experienced this without knowing what to call it. A person says the right words, but your body doesn't relax. A plan looks perfect on paper, but something in your chest feels closed. A familiar place should feel comforting, but instead it feels loud, cramped, or strangely unreal. You try to convince yourself everything is fine, but some deeper intelligence keeps whispering through fatigue, sensitivity, dreams, hesitation, or sudden waves of emotion. Not to frighten you, but to get your attention. The perspective shift is this. Maybe your sensitivity is not the enemy. Maybe it is the instrument through which the new reality is being detected. What you call being too sensitive may actually be your system refusing to remain numb. What you call needing space may be your body protecting the small signal that has not become strong enough yet. What you call emotional waves may be old information leaving the system. And what you call confusion may be the mind arriving late to a truth the body already touched. But the body does not speak in explanations. It speaks in atmosphere. It speaks through tension, relief, heaviness, peace, contraction, openness, silence. And once you begin to listen without panic, another pattern becomes impossible to ignore. It is not only places and routines that begin to feel different. Certain people begin to feel different too, as if the emotional air between you has quietly changed. One of the quietest signs of recalibration is that certain people begin to feel different in your presence. They may not have done anything wrong. They may not have changed their words, their habits, or the way they speak to you. And still, the atmosphere between you feels unfamiliar. A conversation that once felt natural now feels slightly forced.
Yeah.
A connection that once pulled you in now leaves you strangely tired. This can be confusing because the mind wants a clear reason. It wants someone to blame. It wants to say, they became distant, or I changed, or something happened. But sometimes nothing dramatic happened at all. Sometimes the invisible pattern between two people simply stops carrying the same charge. You are not rejecting them. You are no longer resonating with the version of yourself that needed that dynamic to feel complete. You may notice this around people who once defined your emotional world. Someone whose approval used to matter deeply now feels less powerful over you. Someone whose chaos used to pull you in now feels strangely loud. Someone you used to perform for now makes you feel the exhaustion of performing. And then comes the quiet grief. Not the grief of losing an enemy, but the grief of outgrowing a familiar energy that once felt like home. This is where many people misunderstand transformation. They think growth always looks like confidence, clarity, and clean decisions. But often, it begins as an ache in the places where your old attachments used to live. You may miss people you no longer feel safe opening to. You may love someone and still know that your inner life becomes smaller around them. You may feel guilty for needing distance from energies that once helped you survive. The psychological truth is that identity is relational. We don't only become ourselves alone. We become ourselves inside mirrors, expectations, tensions, roles, and emotional agreements. So when you begin to change, some relationships feel strange because they are still speaking to an older version of you. They keep calling a name that something inside you no longer answers to. And that silence can feel cruel before it feels freeing. But not every distance is abandonment. Some distance is the space your new self needs in order to breathe. Some silence is not coldness, but recalibration. Some relationships don't end in conflict. They simply stop finding the same doorway into you. And when the people around you no longer confirm who you used to be, you are left facing the most mysterious space of all. The space where you no longer know who you are becoming. There is a strange emptiness that appears when the old self begins to dissolve. It doesn't always feel peaceful. It can feel blank, suspended, almost invisible. You may not know what you want anymore. You may not know where you belong. You may look at your life and feel as if the person who built it has quietly stepped out of the room. This is not the kind of emptiness people talk about easily. From the outside, you may still seem functional. You still answer, work, move, smile, continue. But inside, the old emotional engine is no longer running the same way. The desires that once organized your days feel distant. The identity that once gave shape to your choices no longer feels strong enough to hold you. And this is where fear often enters. The mind says, "I'm lost." It says, "I should know by now." It says, "Something is wrong with me because I don't feel certain." But certainty would be premature in this stage. You cannot fully know the new self while the old self is still dissolving. A seed does not look like a tree while it is underground. The hidden truth is that this neutral space is not failure. It is the place where false urgency loses its power. You are no longer being pushed by the same wounds, the same expectations, the same hunger to prove your worth. That can feel empty at first, because so much of your old movement may have been fueled by pressure. When pressure leaves, silence arrives. And silence can feel terrifying when you have mistaken pressure for purpose. But beneath that silence, something is being rewritten. Not loudly. Not with a perfect plan. Not with instant answers. It happens through subtle preferences, new sensitivities, quiet refusals, small moments of peace, and the growing inability to betray yourself in the same ways. You may not know who you are becoming yet, but you are beginning to know who you can no longer pretend to be. This is the emotional realization that changes the whole process. Maybe you are not behind. Maybe you are between versions. Maybe the lack of solid ground is not proof that life has abandoned you, but proof that the old foundation is being removed before it becomes a prison. And when you stop demanding that the new identity arrive fully formed, you begin to notice something almost hidden. The new reality has already started announcing itself, but only in signs quiet enough to be missed. The new reality rarely arrives like thunder. It doesn't usually enter your life with a dramatic sign, a sudden miracle, or one undeniable moment where everything becomes clear. More often, it begins so quietly that you almost dismiss it. A different kind of calm appears in a place where you used to feel pressure. A desire fades without a fight. A strange peace visits you before your life has fully changed. You may notice that old chaos no longer seduces you the same way. The conversations that once kept you emotionally busy start to feel unnecessary. The drama that once gave your life intensity now feels like noise. The need to explain yourself begins to weaken. You still care, but not in the same desperate way. Something inside you is becoming less available to what once consumed you. This is one of the clearest signs that calibration is beginning to stabilize. Your outer life may still look unfinished, uncertain, even messy. But internally, the signal is changing. You are no longer searching for yourself in the places that made you disappear. You are no longer confusing intensity with meaning. You are no longer calling every familiar wound a destiny, and then come the small clues. A thought appears at the exact moment you need it. A coincidence feels too precise to be ignored. A door closes, and instead of panic, you feel a strange inner pause. You find yourself drawn to silence, simplicity, different people, different rhythms. Not because you planned it, but because something unseen seems to be organizing your attention. Psychologically, this is what happens when your inner world begins to stop negotiating with the old pattern. Your nervous system starts choosing peace before your mind has built an argument for it. Your intuition becomes sharper because it is no longer buried under constant resistance. You begin to sense what belongs and what doesn't, not through dramatic certainty, but through quiet recognition. The new reality does not shout. It feels like something in you finally stops flinching. And this is the final mystery of the calibration process. Everything felt off because something in you was learning how to stop matching what was never truly yours. The distance, the confusion, the endings, the silence, the strange tiredness, the changing relationships, the empty space between identities, none of it was random. It was the hidden movement of your life trying to bring you back into contact with a deeper truth. And once you begin to recognize that truth, you stop asking why everything feels off and start noticing what is quietly beginning to feel real. So maybe this phase of your life is not a breakdown in the way you feared. Maybe it is a recalibration, a quiet correction happening beneath the surface, where the old signals are losing power and the new ones are still becoming clear. That is why the same life can suddenly feel unfamiliar. That is why certain people feel distant, certain dreams feel hollow, certain routines feel heavy, and certain silences feel strangely necessary. You are not being punished for changing. You are being asked to stop betraying the part of you that already knows the old pattern is finished. And if this message found you at the right moment, don't rush to explain everything. Just pay attention to what feels lighter, what feels false, what keeps repeating, and what quietly refuses to leave your awareness. Like this video if it gave language to something you've been feeling. Subscribe if you want to keep walking through these hidden layers with us, and comment the word calibration if you feel that your reality is shifting in ways you can no longer ignore. Because sometimes the moment everything feels off is the moment your life is finally trying to become honest.